All right, I see participants joining.
All right, good.
Hello, everybody who's logged in already. Just give us a couple of minutes to let everybody join in, and then we'll get started. I can see there's a few of us coming in.
Yeah, you can see it. I can't see it, right?
If you click on participants.
Oh, I see it now. I see a number. Yes. Okay, yeah.
All right, I think so. Welcome everybody to our COVID-19 Friday call or Friday webinar. Appreciate everybody here that has joined in. My name's Claire. I'm a SCORE mentor, and I'm here today really just to help facilitate the call. I'm not an expert on the COVID-19. I am just here to help Chris, who's on the call, and hopefully another expert will be joining. Joe Worth will be joining the call as well in a little while to join and share some information. So before we get started, a couple of things. We're going to put a poll up while Chris is talking. I'll execute the poll. So if anybody feels like filling in that information, it's helpful for us to learn. And if anybody has questions for Chris or Joe when he joins, if you could please put that into the Q&A function, and we will address those to the panelists and have them answered for you. So I hope everybody can see the Q&A function in Zoom. If not, shoot a message in chat and we'll try and walk you through it. But the Q&A function will help us to moderate the questions and make sure everybody gets answered. So without me rambling on too much, I'm going to introduce you to Chris Carlsson. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself and his experience, and get straight into the details.
All right, thank you. Yes, good afternoon. I'm Chris Carlsson, and I have been a SCORE mentor for 4 years, I think, and I was chapter chair for about 2.5. Prior to mentor life, go back some 10 years, I was general partner and CEO of a decent-sized logistics company and transportation company. For the last 10 years, I've been doing interim CFO, president type consulting work, and also turnaround type consulting work for small and medium-sized companies. And nowadays, I also do some financial assessment of transactions and risk assessment of transactions. And today, of course, we are in a different world with the coronavirus, and especially with the federal assistance with the PPP program that now has been launched and some 350 billion earmarked, paid and to be paid. And quite a few companies has been funded, a lot to still come. So we are at the phase now when people have gotten money. So the question is, what do we do now? What's important and how do we handle it? And I put together a little slide that we can fairly quickly go through, hopefully triggers questions, and we can have a discussion of what's going on. And hopefully I can figure out how to share my screen. There, and share. And you folks are now seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, good, good. So yes, this front PowerPoint here about PPP dollars, forgiveness, and the payback. Those are the dollars, forgiveness, payback are the three facets there. And what you have here kind of describes the emotions that you get when you look at this. All from thank you and hallelujah, I'm going to bloom again. And then you start thinking about, wait a minute, I'm going to have to pay these back. And then you start realizing that we better plan this out a little bit. So let's start from the beginning here as to what do we get? And I can speak to this because I am associated with a company that I'm working with now that is getting money. They have been approved through SBA, and it's in the bank's fulfillment department, and which also is overwhelmed, of course. But yes, you have a big few here. Wow, we got it. And there are a lot of people are feeling that way, and that we got the money, it actually came out, we got in before the deadline of who gets the money and when they get money, etc. And what people get, what companies get, small companies under 500 employees, get 2.5 times average payroll cost. And that's based on gross payroll, less you have to deduct out anything from any person who makes over $100,000, you deduct the over $100,000 portion out of it. Add local and state payroll taxes, add benefits cost, add health insurance cost. That's the basis for the calculation. Joe, if you have heard anything lately today, anything changed, just chip in anytime you want to.
Thank you, Chris. Chris, one clarification, 2.5 times average payroll costs for what period?
For, it depends on what bank you ask, actually. Most banks have asked average payroll costs for 2019 calendar year. The actual direction from SBA phrases it as the last 12 months.
Is it monthly payroll for that 12-month period?
Average monthly payroll, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sorry, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big distinction. So it's basically 2.5 month payroll cost plus health insurance cost. That's what it's based on. So then there is another part of it. You get the money. Now there is a clock starting to tick. And that's an 8-week clock. Because there are costs associated with what you do as a company that is a forgiveness window. You have 8 weeks to accrue expenses that are forgiven from the loan. As it stands right now, it's 8 weeks, that's it. So if you got the money yesterday, we better start getting ready, figuring out what do I do to get this forgiven. And the 8 weeks goes fast, folks. 8 weeks is nothing. And it starts counting the day you get funding. So better jump on it at that point. So then the question is, what is forgiven and what do we have to pay back? So the basis for forgiveness, and this is during the 8 weeks following a funding. So the basis is the gross payroll for those 8 weeks, the local and state payroll taxes, the benefit cost, and the healthcare cost. That's the basis for what you have. Then in addition to that, you also get additional eligible expenses. And those are basically rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. And that is for agreements that were effective before 2/15/20. So if you're going to get to deduct rent, you have to have a lease that was signed before and had an effective date before 2/15/20. And how it works for the additional expenses is that it's phrased so that it is 25% of the forgiven amount. What that translates to is that it's 1/3 of the basis of the payroll cost that you have. So if the easiest number to do that with is to say that, let's say, the big number, that your total forgiven amount is 800,000. So a quarter of that is 200,000 that can be non-payroll cost. So, and phrased another way, if you have 600,000 in payroll cost, you can have up to 200,000 of non-payroll cost of these eligible expenses, provided that you don't exceed the loan amount plus interest. So the max forgiveness you have is the loan amount plus interest, and then you look at what the basis is and additional expenses. So for example, if you have a loan for $30,000, and then once you get to the 8 weeks, you've been slow, so you didn't have as much payroll, you couldn't get the people in, etc. The basis is 10,000. Max additional expenses would then become $3,333, a third of the 10,000. So then max forgiveness is 13,333. If the actual expenses, added expenses adds up to 2,000, then the forgiveness is 12,000 max. If the loan was only 8,000, then the max forgiveness is 8,000. And then the payback, I'm going to put this somewhere here, maybe there. So the payback, you have to pay back anything that is not forgiven. So you take your loan, and let's say in our example that the loan is $30,000, forgiveness was 13,333. So you have payback of 16,667 plus interest, which is 1%. That translates to, assuming that the calculation is based as you do a mortgage, that it's $938 a month that you're going to have to pay back, because it's over 18 months. First, there is a six-month deferral where you don't pay anything, but you do accrue the interest, so which comes to really 0.5% of the non-forgiven amount. Then you have 18 months to pay back the non-forgiven amount. So obviously, the more you can pack in to be forgiven, the less you have to pay back. Because everybody's going to have the same question when you do your calculations. When I come to the other side, 6 months out from my funding, am I going to have the $938 a month? Or if it's a lot more money, am I going to have the $23,000 a month that is going to take to pay it back? And what happens if we don't pay it back? Interesting question. I can't find anybody who can answer the question. And it's obviously too early. We haven't gone there yet. Nobody has thought about it, really. But there is no personal guarantees on these loans, and not collateralized either. So what bite is there really, and what are the banks going to do to be able to get the 100% guarantee from SBA in terms of going after people who don't pay? All question we have no answers to. What we do know, as of right now, what you don't get forgiven, you have to pay off over 18 months after 6 months are deferred. That was my short intro, and we are open for business, I guess, Kayla. And there we go.
Thank you so much, Chris. I think we have Joe. Joe, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit, and tell folks your background and your experience?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Worth. I'm the treasurer of the local SCORE chapter. Been with SCORE a couple years. In business, I am a longtime chief financial officer. Was chief financial officer for 5 different companies over the years. And then for the past 13 years, I've been a consulting CFO, helping small business owners as their part-time CFO. And cash flow is one of my areas of expertise. So I guess that's why I'm here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'm going to open the, we'll open up the questions. We have a few questions that have come in already. So I'll read them. I'll read out the questions, and then if we get some duplicates, I'll try and kind of moderate those. The first question we have is from Steven Silberman. He's a SCORE mentor. He has a couple of clients who have sole proprietorships with no employees. He thinks they may be able to qualify on net income basis, but they will only be able to use it for rents, mortgage, interest, and utilities as they have no payroll. And he's just looking for a little clarification on that.
To go back to what you said before, there are no experts on this. We only know what we've heard of and what we've read, and what other so-called experts are saying. And that is that there is some talk that you may be able to qualify on the same basis as you get the loan, which is a net income type basis for the 8 weeks. How they're going to do that, I have no idea. Or we don't know yet. Is it going to be advisable that you put yourself on a type payroll as a sole proprietor? Obviously very hard to do, etc. But based on the way that things are written now, if you don't have payroll, you have no basis. So you have no basis to actually get forgiven. So it's going to have to be on some kind of a net income basis for sole proprietors. What do you think, Joe?
I have no further expertise or insight into that, Chris. Sorry.
Okay, so Stephen, if that answers your question, let us know if you want more clarification. Perhaps you can just post another question, and we'll get to it. Now we have Mitali Vasa. I'm new to SCORE. Last Thursday's discussion was about EIDL being processed. However, I've not, and just to clarify, the last Thursday was the Circle of Women, I believe was when we had the SBA guest speaking on that. However, I've not heard anything. I cannot qualify for PPP as there are no employees. How or when can I expect to hear if any rent payments, or can I expect to hear if any rent payments have become a big challenge? Any suggestions would help.
If I jumped in first on the rent payment portion of it, like any small business in this situation, you need to deal with your outflow of money. As Joe is dealing with his clients with cash flow, first thing you tell them is stop paying whatever you can stop paying. That's number one. Then you start thinking about where can I get the money? But you got to stop the outflow because you're not going to survive otherwise. Now, to go back first on the PPP, yes, you can qualify based on the net income basis for sole proprietors. On EIDL, some people have actually got them funded for the whole thing. I've heard different things. I have a couple of companies where we got the advance, we got the additional 15,000 that was part of the bigger loan that was going to happen. And I've heard different things and read different things. I've heard that it's still going. As a matter of fact, I got an email from SBA 2 o'clock this morning for one of our operations saying that they are reviewing it right now. Then I hear that no, they're not going to do anything. All the money is going to be funneled into PPP. So I don't know.
Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm afraid not. I'm not being very useful here, but Chris is a tremendous expert.
I only know what I know and read. So.
Yeah, you're just deeper into the government stuff than I have been so far. That's good.
Just a request to some of the attendees. So I'm seeing some questions are coming in on the chat function. If you could try to put them on the Q&A function, it would be easier for us to make sure we get to answer all the questions. If you've already posted in the chat function, I will get to it. I'll go through them, but just for the additional questions, it would be great if you could put in the Q&A. So we have a question from Teresa, and I apologize if I get the name pronunciation wrong, Doria. She has an LLC Schedule C business. It's her primary source of income, as well as receives an occasional paycheck from a part-time position. When she tried to apply for unemployment in New Jersey, she was denied and eventually to be considered for PUA. It prevents me from doing so because it recognizes my part-time position and thinks I'm still employed. I need the PUA because of my primary occupation is service-based and shut down mid-March. How do I get around this to be eligible for PUA? And if I am approved for PUA, what am I entitled to as a self-employed individual?
I don't know. I saw something that Anthony had some knowledge of that PUA, that New Jersey had done something to let self-employed people qualify for unemployment insurance. That's all I really know at this point.
Okay, do we have, can we give Teresa any direction on how she might, do we have any resources she may be able to go to?
She could get in contact with Anthony Payer at SCORE Volunteer, Anthony.Payer at scorevolunteer.org, and he might have some better answers.
All right, Teresa, I'll put that in the chat function for you, so you have his email address. I have a question from Brian Barreto. It's what about the EIDL loan? I think maybe just a little bit of clarification on what the EIDL loan is, Chris or Joe?
Yeah, I can jump in there first. The EIDL was the first that came up. It's a up to 30-year term with a 3.75% interest. And there is a link to go directly to the SBA to apply for this loan. In that link, you actually don't ask for money. You give the information as to how much payroll you have and those kind of things. And then SBA figures out how much you're eligible for. And right now, there is a little box to check in to get an advance. And then you, at one point in time, you probably also get an email to get an additional 15,000 advance while the rest is sitting in the queue. That's in addition to the PPP program at this point.
Joe, anything to add?
Sorry.
I'll let you do it first next time.
There we go.
No.
So another question is from Teresa. I have applied for the PPP through my bank. I know the initial funds have been depleted. Will I have to reapply if more funds are released? And how long does it normally take to be approved if the funds are available? If I manage to be approved for PUA, will I be denied if I have received the PPP funds?
I don't think that unemployment insurance and the PPP are related.
No.
I doubt it. I don't think that
so,
they
but
are
who knows?
connected. And I don't think that the state entities have any way of actually connecting with the SBA to make that connection. When are the additional money going to be available? When Congress get their act together. And I would say, email your congressman, congresswoman, call them, put pressure on them to get this done. I believe that they don't have a choice but to fund it. And I believe that they might have to fund it again. There's a lot of companies that don't have the funding yet. And there was a Bloomberg report today that a lot of states are only up to about 25% of eligible payroll for funding. So there, I think there's a lot more money coming. Timing, anybody's guess. Who knows?
Yeah,
and a lot of delays has been with the banks getting started up actually processing.
Right. And the reapplication question, I think that's up to each individual bank. You have to talk to your bank, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Another question here from Donald Schaefer is, how does this affect seasonal business?
In the application process, there was a feature where you could adjust your average payroll for the seasonality. So, and of course, we're in a Jersey Shore, so it's apropos here. So you could do that for the seasonality, and that would adjust your loan amount. I have seen nothing that would allow you to adjust the actual basis for the forgiveness portion of it, which leads you also to another question, and that is that if I have a choice, when do I take my loan? If I'm a seasonal business, I believe I'm going to open up again. And if I have money, do I actually want to delay taking the money so I can actually beef up the payroll? I don't have the answer to the question, but it's worth thinking about for seasonal business to get worked on the forgiveness part instead of paying it back.
Okay, we have a from Michelle Lucas. I have not filed my 2019 taxes. The bank is asking for a Schedule C. I'm a sole proprietor and pay myself from a business account to my personal account. Would that be sufficient?
It should be. My understanding of that is that most people don't have their 2019 taxes filed yet. You're going to have to give them, I know people being asked for the 17 and 18 Schedule C, and also have to give them what would be the Schedule C. I know some people actually went in and did the Schedule C type thing on TurboTax or whatever. Or I know some people who actually just took their 2019 P&L and used that.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question. Do we think that self-employed businesses or self-employed business owners without payroll will be able to have what they pay independent contractors, 1099 people, substitute for payroll?
No. The intention, the Congress intention, administration intention is that the independent contractors and 1099 should do their own PPP application. That's how it's written now, and it is specifically said that it's not included.
Okay. Just for the people who are asking questions, if we've answered your question and you still want some clarification, feel free to ask again. I'm just having a, okay, so the next question, is there anyone available to help me complete the application? I'm not sure if I completed it correctly.
Yes, there are. All you have to do is Google, and you're going to get a whole bunch of them that do that. And I'm surprised you don't have a whole bunch of them in your email box. Now, having said that, I would also say that there are a number of lenders, especially non-bank lenders, that have very user-friendly portals, and that are very good at explaining to you what information that you need.
Right, and I've got lots of emails from local CPA firms offering assistance as well. So if you have a relationship with a CPA firm or would like to have one, I'm sure they would try to help you out as well. Their tax season has been stretched out a long way, so they should have time for you.
Yeah, and the information it shouldn't be that expensive. The information isn't that difficult to get. I would say if you wait now, you're trying to get hold of your CPA and those kind of things, one thing you want to do, get with your payroll company. If you have payroll, get the payroll registers. That's the basis for the information that you need.
And would it also be appropriate to say that SCORE mentors might be able to help people out?
Yes. From a conceptual perspective, I don't think that SCORE mentors is appropriate that they actually help filling out the forms.
Okay, fair enough.
There's a question here, and I don't think we've answered it, is for the PPP forgiveness, can you add your salary to be forgiven, even if you are technically not on payroll, but do pay estimated taxes throughout the year?
I'm assuming that you're not talking about sole proprietors now. I don't know, and I have a hard time trying to figure out what support mechanism you would use to be submitted to support the number. Joe, you have any idea?
I'm sorry, haven't run into that one yet.
I think that might be a question for a CPA, because PPP forgiveness, I believe, is based on how you spend the money, right?
That's how you spend the money, and I am convinced that they're going to ask for your payroll register for a period of time, and that's what's going to be your support, even though it's very vague in the actual description that is there now. They're going to have to look at something, and I believe that that's what they're going to look at, and except for sole proprietors, where they're going to go in and some kind of a net income thing. So if you're a sole proprietor, get with your CPA now, or whatever system you use to get yourself set up so that you can cover the 8-week period. Because the 8-week period may be from April 28th, 8 weeks forward. That's a hard thing for a P&L to do.
Then I'm not sure if we answered this one. It came in the chat, but I understand that payments made to independent contractors by 1099 are eligible. We covered that one, didn't we?
We did.
Okay.
And what I've read, it says specifically that they are not. Having said that, I know some banks that have accepted them and got them through and approved by the SBA. The world isn't perfect.
Okay, so a question is, for businesses that have submitted applications and got a number, but no notification of whether they got the loan, now that the money dried up, what should they do? And if and when more funds get into it, do they need to reapply? So I think we've answered, we're not sure, right?
Talk to your bank.
Talk to the bank. As difficult as that is, it's not easy now. The relationship guy or gal will probably say that they have really no access to information sitting in the queue. But you have to talk to the bank. I'm not in that situation. If I was, I would probably not. I would try to ascertain that it sits in the queue, and once it open up, that what I've heard, going back, I've heard from SBA people telling lenders that they should forward the application into SBA to apply, and that SBA won't do anything until they have additional funding. That's what I read from New Jersey SBA rep yesterday, I think.
And then there was a question with the PPP, if your business was mandated to be closed and you get approved for the PPP, how do you move forward within the 8-week period when you don't know when you're allowed to reopen?
You have no basis to be able to calculate your forgiveness. So if you, at this point in time, it could change. At this point in time, if the rules stand as they are, you have no basis to actually calculate forgiveness. So the whole thing would become payable over 18 months, starting in 6 months. Will they change that? I don't know. Would you have the ability to delay taking the money till you can open the door and have eligible expenses? I don't know. I haven't heard any banker who have been able to actually answer that question. And I haven't actually had any business owner who wanted to take the chance of doing that.
Right, and in practical sense, if your business is closed, then there's no payroll to pay anyway. The money can sit in the bank, and if the worst case, if you never get open during the 8 weeks, just send it back.
Right, that's right.
Would you be paying interest on that if you took it and then said, but it's minimal interest, I guess?
It's
1%
interest.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Arthur, who's actually one of our SCORE mentors, has just made a comment as well for everybody. If you call Senator Vin Gopal's office, and I'll put the number in the chat, he has a staff of 6, and they have good information for both residents and small businesses. So just a comment for everybody, and I'll just put the number in the chat so everybody can see it. We had another question. So from Marisol, I'm new here. I wholesale herbal teas and I am still in business. I have more demand for the teas, but at the same time, I'm experiencing a problem of supply and cash flow because my suppliers do not give much credit like before. If I do not get enough cash flow soon, my business will have a negative impact. I'm not sure if I can apply for any of this help that the government offers. And I do have 2 employees on payroll.
She should be able to apply. I just from what you described, unless she's running her own business on a cash basis with no records, she should be able to apply. I would say she could reach out to a SCORE mentor from a conceptual basis. Most SCORE mentors by now can probably talk people through what it is that they are needing. But basically, if she can produce a payroll register, she knows her EIN, those basic things, she should be able to apply.
Okay, I would say so. And then if Marisol, if you wanted to reach out to a SCORE mentor, I'll put the website, but monmouth.score.org is where the SCORE mentors are listed. And there's a number of people in there that you could reach out to directly. And you can link up with someone from there. You may also, just adding to what Chris said, and maybe Joe has something to add, but also just taking a look at maybe with your accountant or maybe with someone with some experience about just how you manage your cash flow in these times might be helpful too, because a lot of this is, especially if your business is in high demand and you have high demand for your supplies, you may want to just take a look at how you manage some of the cash flow there. So I'll put the SCORE website for you to reach out to a mentor. Grace has just said, my bank just sent me something that they will resubmit the funds if they become available. So I don't know if Chris or Joe, I don't know if you have any experience of the banks, all banks kind of following the same methods, or are they all completely different?
They are different.
Yeah, different all over.
Yep. No consistency at all, I would say.
Okay. So the person who asked earlier about the EIDL payment status is just wanting to clarify the rent payments that she was referring to. Sorry, he or she, I'm not sure, sorry about that. But the rent payments being referred to were from tenants, not rent payments out, but from tenants. Let me see if I can.
I don't remember the original question.
Oh, rent.
I don't
so I've just found the original question. I've not heard anything about being qualified for PPP as she has no employees. But then rent payments have become a big challenge. Rent payments from tenants. So there's a building owned and there's tenants in the building and they've become a big challenge. So any suggestions there?
Chris, I'll jump in on that one. All the big banks and probably most banks and mortgage companies for commercial properties, they recognize that people's tenants have stopped paying their rent. And in my experience, virtually all of them are willing to give deferment of mortgage payments until this passes. most of them will probably end up adding those mortgage payments to the end of your mortgage, so that you won't have to pay it all back right away. The same thing for the utility companies. I would contact the utility companies, tell them, what your situation is, that your rent payments are not coming in, ask them for deferments. Basically anybody like that, mortgage, utilities, your fixed costs of the building, you have to have, set up a list of all the people, all the vendors, all your obligations, and start with the biggest ones first, which is probably your mortgage payment. Go down the list and negotiate with all of them. Tell them what's going on. They aren't going to be interested in forcing you out of business. They want to keep you as a customer, until they get in such dire straits as they can't do it. Most of them are, quite frankly, bigger and stronger financially than all of us and our small businesses. So that's, I think, the way to handle that. Chris?
No, I agree that you have to do anything you can to push your obligations, kick that can down the road, as far down the road as you possibly can. And there's only one way to do that, and that is to call them, to communicate with them. And everybody understands the situation now. I haven't heard of many of that nature mortgage company or landlords, especially a little bit bigger landlords, that aren't accommodating. And in terms of the other side of that, when about applying for the help, again, if this is a sole proprietor, they can use the net income portion of the and Schedule C of their tax return as basis for that. If it's an LLC and it's a property and there's no payroll, I'm not sure. I can't answer the question. Have to talk to the CPA.
Real estate is put on Schedule E instead of Schedule C also, which makes it different. So
yeah, that's true.
So we actually have a similar question. So Mitali has listed some of the top expenses, but somebody else, Tony, has also said, no, that was the wrong, sorry. Somebody has asked about property taxes, and does anybody know if there's going to be any relief for property taxes because they're up and coming, the next payments are up and coming. Do we have any insight on whether or not, that was Michael that asked that question?
I get my information on that from the news like everybody else. And the latest I heard was there has not been anything granted for property tax relief so far. And, the governor has been very reluctant to do that because that's the main part of his income, his meaning the state's income. So that's very much up in the air. There's absolutely nothing in place yet. But I think, this is one of those instances where you may have to ask forgiveness rather than permission. If it's a choice between not paying your property taxes and going out of business, I think if it was my business, and this is just me, I would talk to the government entities involved, talk to your town. I would not pay it, and I would deal with it later and negotiate with them. You have some time for property taxes. You don't have to. They're not going to put you out of business instantly. They're going to, and everybody's going to have the same problem, and they're going to understand. And, quite frankly, with a lot of these things, if it comes down to legal action and juries, what jury is going to side with the town instead of a small business?
Yeah. And on the property taxes, Joe is right. There is a timing issue here. Presuming that when this started, that you were up to speed on your property taxes. So there is a timeline as you go down. And in most towns I've seen, it comes down to right before those things go to auction.
Yes.
And that is a little bit down the road.
Next year.
Yeah.
Just a quick comment, if for the attendees, we launched a poll. It's not, you're not obligated to do it. It would just be helpful for us. So if you look in the polls section, if you can go in and answer those questions, that would be great. I don't want to detract away from the purpose of the call, but just there is a poll in there if anybody wants to go in and submit some answers. Then there was another question here from Tony. can independent contractors fill out the applications, etc., themselves, or does it have to be done by an accountant or a professional to prepare it and sign it?
No, I would say that most, Joe, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I think most people can do it themselves. They may need the accountant or somebody more professional to help them get the information, but actually putting the information into the application, I don't believe requires a professional. Chris?
No, I would agree that what I have seen, I have actually done it myself, and it's not that complicated. And what I've seen for to go down to independent contractors in the trucking business, I've seen themselves being able to do it. They're going to have to ask questions, yes, but it's doable.
So then we just have a couple of information. So Jane Meyer, hi Jane. We had a call with her last week, and she's reminded something important. If you have a SBA loan in, application in, or an EIDL application in, there is an email address. It's disastercustomerservice@sba.gov that you can go in, and if you email that, they will get back to you. I don't know how quickly, but so I'll just pop that in the chat as well. But you can follow up the disaster customer service at sba.gov email address.
I asked a question a day and a half ago, and they answered about 24 hours later, give or take.
Not bad.
No.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. And Arthur has just mentioned, if you Google search 100 most active SBA lender, 7 parentheses A, close parentheses lenders, it'll give you a list of the banks that have good ratings for processing loans. So I'll pop that in the chat as well. And another website that's on the sba.gov website that has some information that might be helpful.
Yeah, some of those banks aren't open to the public, so to speak. Like the biggest lender is Wells Fargo, and they're only at this point dealing with their own customers, and barely that. There are a bunch of lenders coming on board that are user-friendly and that have started to submit applications.
And then we have, so Matali has said the top list of expenses as mortgage, insurance, utilities, and lastly, property taxes, and has asked about the relief in property taxes that we haven't, I think we've covered. What I might add to that, to Matali, is maybe you want to reach out to a SCORE mentor, and they can perhaps help with sort of cash flow management and looking, and give you some advice on how to manage that and navigate around that in these times.
Yeah, you mentioned one expense in there. Depending on what business you are, insurance is in some businesses a big ticket, and I've seen several insurance companies defer or lower their premiums based on that the period of time that the risk for them has gone down considerably.
Jane has just reminded as well, it's a good point. If you email the SBA disaster email address, make sure you put your application number in the subject line.
Right.
Okay, we've had from Lois. I'm a psychiatrist with a very small private practice, which I operate as a sole proprietor with no employees, and I'm not incorporated. Am I still eligible for the small business loan grant? Also, I've heard the maximum is 1,000 per employee. So does that mean I would only be eligible for 1,000? And is that just a one-time payment? Also, I get Social Security. I'm in my 70s and also owe a significant amount in back taxes to the IRS due to previous recession, and wonder how that might impact my eligibility. I usually work part-time jobs as an independent contractor, and they provide about 90% of my income. But the last one ended 6 months ago. So I'm trying to apply for unemployment, and I know I cannot use both programs, so need to know what to try for.
Wow. That's a hard one. There's a lot of connections going on there that it's beyond my expertise. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, a couple of things there to kind of pull the thread is that I think we touched on it before between unemployment and the different programs. I don't think that they really are connected. In the PPP, at least, I don't think that they look at taxes owed. I don't believe so. In the EIDL, I'm not sure. But the only way to find out is to apply. The worst thing that can happen is that you get a no.
So just as a quick catch up with, so we have 10 minutes left. We have a couple of other questions that I'm going to get to. I just, sorry, I started reading the question as I was talking. One of the questions is this only about loans or finances? Does anybody know what our requirements are providing the emergency leave? Is this up to the employee if they want it, or rather to file for unemployment if they can't work due to childcare issues?
It depends on what state you are. But the federal also did something about beefing up the Federal Family Leave Act in the beginning of the Corona thing here. And that's also dependent on how many employees you have and those kind of things. But yes, it was beefed up. I can't remember the details of it.
I have at least 3 probably primary business contacts in other organizations that are HR people. One is an HR attorney, one sets up benefit plans, the other is an HR consultant, and they put out emails about this stuff. This is very complicated stuff. I would absolutely recommend you reach out to an HR professional of some sort to sort this out for you, because it's complicated. It's changing, like the SBA stuff. It's changing daily. Someone could contact me and I could put them in touch with those people. I don't know, many professionals are helping people with simple questions for free these days. As am I, quite frankly, but it might cost you some money to get the right answer. But I think people are being very generous right now.
Yeah, I believe that to be right. I have that experience also. And on that question, if you have a payroll company, they may also have people at the payroll company who knows. That's a
good idea. Yeah.
And Tony, one of our Monmouth mentors, is also just posted in the chat for everyone the New Jersey Gov Labor Worker Protections link. So there may be some good information on there.
Mm-hmm.
And just in adding to what Chris said, Jean has also just mentioned that we have a relationship with Paychex, and I'll put Joanne Farina's email address in this chat. Oh, here you go, Jean's just given it. So we could feel free to reach out to Paychex if you're not already working with them, and Joanne Farina is our contact there.
Claire, that raises another strategy, and that is payroll companies like Paychex, and I have a good relationship with a small locally owned payroll company, and the PEOs, professional employer organizations. All these people are going to want your business when business gets better, and to, probably talking to their salespeople, who will in turn put you in touch with their experts, their HR experts, is probably a clever way to get some information about this stuff. Yeah. Haven't tried it, but I would try it if I needed those kind of answers.
And then one last question that's just come through is, can you apply for PPP through multiple banks? Great question.
Question has come up several times, and I have myself landed on an answer, and that is yes, but you can only get one loan, and one of the banks is going to be first. And if you don't trust the bank you're with, then I haven't discovered anything that is a negative about it, I think.
Other than maybe pissing off a couple of bankers, I agree, Chris.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they put a lot of work into this stuff.
Yes, they do put work into it. So if you have a good bank and they're doing their best, maybe that's not the thing to do. If you have a bank that is completely out of bounds and they are there, then I might consider it.
And the other situation would be if your current banker is not an SBA lender and they can't help you, then, I might be tempted to shop a couple, 3 banks, but I would be upfront with them about how I'm doing it and what I'm doing. They may or may not want to work with you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I'm going to start to wrap it up because it's 3:56. We have, so for all the attendees, thanks for joining. We have this call every week for the foreseeable future. Next week, we're going to have an attorney on with us. His name is John Murdoch, and he's with a law firm in Red Bank. And he can help sort of deal with some of maybe the contractual, and he'll do a presentation next week on some of the contractual and legal issues happening with COVID-19. So if anybody has any questions about that, please join. There'll be other information, and we'll have other panelists on as well. He's our guest speaker. If you have any questions and you want to reach out to a SCORE mentor, I put the email address in, but it's monmouth.score.org, and all the mentors are on there, and you can select someone who you feel may best suit you. No mentor really ever works alone. Most people bring in co-mentors for help where they don't have the experience. So if you don't find somebody on there who you think may be able to help, that's fine. Reach out to someone anyway, because they'll be able to bring in the right people. Chris and Joe, do you have anything else to add or any closing comments?
In all this, look ahead. If you get the money, look ahead, look what's around the corner, start planning for the future. It's going to come. It comes sooner than you think.
That's good advice. And I would just add that, we will get through this stuff. Hang in there. And my own experience in decades of business is I get in the biggest trouble. I've been in the biggest trouble when I didn't ask for help. So, don't be proud. Don't be sitting there scared. Ask for help. And if the first person that you ask can't help you, they'll refer you to someone else, and they'll refer you to someone else, and, get help, because that it'll not only actually probably help you, it'll make you feel better and less nervous and scared.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining. You may get a survey afterwards, just with some, if you have, just for us, so we may be able to have some feedback for things we can change or do differently on the next call. But again, appreciate you all joining, and hopefully we'll see everybody at the same time next week. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye, everyone.